should homeowners be allowed to turn single-family homes into apartment buildings?
I'm gonna give the answer that nobody likes. It depends. You may have a single family home and you're like, oh, I could tear this down and do 9 stories. Oh, that sounds great. Okay, well, how are you gonna fund that, right?
What's one of the stupidest things you've heard a GC tell a homeowner?
Maybe that they could build it for $50K in today's world.
You can't build an ADU for $50,000 anymore?
I don't think so, no. Not in today's world.
What is bill stacking? Take me through that.
Once you understand how to bill stack, then you're entering a whole new micro development type of strategy, really maximizing density on a single family lot.
The average homeowner can execute an ADU project on their own. Agree or disagree?
No, I disagree big time. If you try to do it on your own, you are signing up for 7 different jobs that you don't even know of yet.
We all get the same 24 hours. So why is it that some people build so much more with them? I'm Brian Coons, and this is the Builder Nation podcast, where we talk to top performers, entrepreneurs, and visionaries to uncover the architecture of a meaningful and fulfilling life. Let's get into it.
Well, welcome back to another episode of the Builder Nation podcast. Today, I have Steph Sells ADUs, Stephanie Gutierrez. And between the two of us, I mean, we have talked to thousands of homeowners on ADUs, feasibility studies, designs, disasters, and just every homeowner in between, right? So we have seen the stuff that works. We've seen the stuff that doesn't. We've seen the industry grow and change over time. And so I'm super excited today to get into probably one of the most controversial investment strategies out there between homeowners and investors. So Stephanie, should homeowners be allowed to turn single-family homes into apartment buildings? What do you think?
I'm going to say it depends. I'm going to give the answer that nobody likes, right? It's not the yes or no. It's the it depends, right? And it depends on many things. The motivation, the intention, the long-term exit strategy, where you're building. There's a lot of things that come into play, but I would say it depends.
Yeah. So what have you seen in terms of density work and what things don't work?
I mean, I think, we've seen recently, like in San Diego, in some areas, you definitely have to be mindful of density in specific pockets because it just doesn't sit well with the community, with the, that specific pocket, that specific area. I would say in some certain neighborhoods, it just doesn't fit well. You have to be mindful of the entire neighborhood as a whole, not just the actual lot that you're looking to build on and maximize density. But, there's other areas where it does fit. And I think I'm excited to talk about that with, some bills that have passed that will allow for that. But always keeping, that in mind and being mindful about where you're building and how much you're building.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And that's something that I see too, right? There's a right product or a best guess of product that fits a certain neighborhood. And sometimes it can be on the denser side and other times it should be on the more conservative side. And I think that, at least in the city of San Diego, that was something we saw a ton of was people, I kind of base it on if people have the ability to see, they can underwrite it, they can execute it, and then they can make decisions based on what they've learned. There's kind of like the 3 components of what really makes a good deal or makes a developer a good developer. The problem with this super dense ADU thing, especially in San Diego, and now it is more widespread in California, is people know the spreadsheet. That's the first stage. But if they've never went full cycle on something, they don't know what amenities are going to actually matter. They don't know what lease-up periods are really going to look like for a park unit versus a non-park unit, et cetera.
Right.
Is
Exactly.
that something you see?
Absolutely. Yeah, and you have to underwrite for all of that, and amenities can vary depending on the location, right? In places like San Diego, you're taking into consideration not having parking. Same goes for LA, right? And in some suburban neighborhoods, maybe having parking, is an added amenity. You can up the rent and provide it as an amenity. So to your point, yeah, you definitely have to be mindful of the entire deal, not just what you're looking to maximize on.
Yeah. What's one of the stupidest things you've heard a GC tell a homeowner about an ADU?
Maybe that they could build it for $50K in today's world.
You can't build an ADU for $50,000 anymore?
I don't think so. No, not in today's world. No.
Man,
And, I was having a conversation the other day with an investor who's wanting to scale the ADU strategy. And My take on ADUs and the cost to build them is still a very, small fraction of what it's going to cost in the next year or two once you're able to sell them off. Because, we had the bill AB 1033, which now San Diego has said yes to and raised their hand, and they're agreeing to be able to condoize your ADU and sell it off. And I think eventually other cities are going to opt in. And once the entire state opts into that bill, now you'll be able to sell them off, and now they're going to be underwritten way differently. The ARV is going to be a lot more predictable. So that means the cost to build it is going to go up because now you know that the value is twice as much as what it is now, right? Right now, we still have issues with that ARV on ADUs because they're just not valued or evaluated the same as any other unit. But once AB 1033 comes into effect in every city, and you're able to sell them off, it's going to change the game. So you could still build it now for a fraction, not 50,000, but I'd say between 100 to 150,000 for a 500 square foot door,
Yeah,
basically.
no, I think definitely think that's a fair price. And, a lot of people, they hear that. And I kind of tell people, it's like, you can build it for $50,000. It's probably not going to be permitted because that's not going to include the soft costs, the
Right, right,
architecture fees, the plan check fees. It's probably not going to be done correctly. It's probably going to be done slower than you want. And then it's
right.
not even going to add the value you want because it's not permitted square footage.
Exactly. And you have to just, think long term, right? Is that $50,000 investment really going to be worth it, or is it worth investing a little bit more and doing it the correct way? And that's going to give you a much better ROI thinking long term. And, not just for the cost, but also the functionality of these units, right? How are you designing them for not just short term, usage of the space, but long term? If it's a rental for now, but maybe it could be your retirement later in life, like think about how you're designing it long term, not just for the short term gain.
Yeah, no, that's super smart. And, I think a lot of people, they look at the dollar amount, they look at the price tag and they say, it's really expensive. So how can I just bootstrap it? I was literally having a conversation with someone the other day where they're basically calling me and they're asking if I can help them out, but they're saying like, oh, well, we might do the work unpermitted first and then go after. And I'm like, I'm not touching that at all. Like that, the level
Exactly.
of additional headache associated. And I think something that that isn't really looked at or talked about enough is the increased risk associated with doing it. Not from you getting red tagged, but from the perspective of if you build something without permits and somebody gets hurt in the unit or something gets, the electrical wasn't done right, all of the pervasive and follow on issues associated with that. And I think people don't really think about that.
Yeah, because a lot of them are being built or were built illegally, right? Or uninhabitable before this whole ADU like wave of ordinances and law came into play. A lot of people were building them unpermitted already. And so obviously that was affecting the landlord and the tenant as well. And tenants are just getting smarter by the day. So they know that if your unit is not permitted, there are a lot of legal actions that they can take. Unfortunately, we are in California where it's a very tenant friendly state, right? So if you could take the precautions, again, thinking long-term investment, you may want to save yourself ten to $20,000, maybe a little bit more on not paying for planning and permits. But in the long run, it's going to cost you a lot more to have to buy out that tenant or even pay that tenant, if for whatever reason you run into issues with the tenant or with the city, and that's something that a lot of homeowners just don't think about because we're always kind of looking at that short-term gain. And you want something cheap, you want it fast, you want it efficient, but you don't think about how that cheap, ADU is always going to cost you a lot more in the long run.
Yeah, that's so accurate. I always tell people it's like it's going to cost the same. It's just going to cost you time, headache, or
If not
money.
more. Yeah.
Yeah.
And not to mention the headaches and the stress, right? Which is one thing I was telling you earlier is shifting, from helping homeowners to now really focusing on growing with some of my investor clients and building out portfolios and really like developing for long-term play. And a lot of it, being buy and hold, not just exiting. And if you are going to exit, then having that next project in mind already lined up with what you're going to do, after the exit. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of exciting bills that are happening too, right? That I think are really taking this like on a whole other level of being able to scale ADUs. And San Diego is a good example of it. But I think with some of these other bills, like I was telling you offline, SB 1211, SB 1123, SB 9, it really changes the game on this ADU strategy, because once you understand how to bill stack, then you're entering a whole new micro development type of strategy, right? Which
Take
I
me through
see a lot of
what is that? What is develop or what is what the stat? What did you call it?
micro development,
No, the stacking.
bill stacking. Yeah.
What is bill stacking? Take me through that.
So bill stacking could be, it really is what it sounds like, right? You're stacking bills to strategize and really leverage these bills so that you could come up with a really high level strategy and being able to build, dense projects. So for example, I had, Jared Jones on my podcast not that long ago, and I'll introduce you to him. He's with Middle Housing Partners out in the Inland Empire. And what he focuses on is SB9, so stacking SB9 with the combination of SB 1123. And for those of you who don't know, 1123 basically allows you to demo a single family home, and build up to 10 units. He's kind of figured out his own niche in which he uses the SB9 bill stacked with SB 1123, stacked with ADUs, and really maximizing density on a single family lot. And that's just like his niche, right? That's become his go-to, and people go to him to implement this strategy and really like he's figured it out, right? And he's still, obviously there's always growing pains and frictions when working with the city, and but he's already kind of done so many that that's his go-to strategy. And that's just one example of bill stacking. There's the SB9 stack, right? You're implementing SB9, whether it's lot split or not lot split, with a combination of ADUs. There's also SB 1211, that you could, and now SB 79 as well. So there's a lot of bills, and it's just understanding how do these bills, how can you bill stack these, right, to really maximize density. But you really can't, that's a whole other level of strategy that you really need to understand. You need to understand code, government codes, how to reference it. And that's kind of what I like to geek out on. And so I surround myself with people like you and others who are in the space, because not everybody wants to do this, right? So the reason why we do it is because, well, obviously we're passionate about it, but it creates a lot of leverage for ourselves, right? I don't do these projects on my own. I have people that are part of my team that really help, and each and every one of us have a, like a role that we play that helps get these projects through the finish line. So for me, it's geeking out on legislation and understanding the law so that my investors can focus on the capital, focus on other things, right? And I kind of just bring that value to the table. But that's what I see a lot of right now. And I'd say just pick one, right? You don't always have to bill stack. I think first try to like master one, and then from there kind of dive into some of these other bills and understand how to stack them, or reach out. It's like really that simple.
Yeah. No, that's really helpful. So I mean, what does your team look like now? I know you've kind of transitioned a little bit from just helping the mom and pop, homeowner to a little bit more into the investment side. So kind of take me through that journey and where you're at now and what that team looks like.
Yeah, so now, I mean, I'm really focusing on working with investors who want to buy multiple units and want to build multiple ADUs, or maybe implement SB 1211, which is multiple ADUs detached, plus converting 25% of the existing structure. And I do that I have a team of like two architects that I work with. I have Cameron, that I work with on the design and build at ADU West Coast. I've been working with him for years. I have a VA that also helps me with all the back end stuff, because, ADUs and ADU consulting and strategizing is just one of my services. The other two is real estate sales and acquisitions. And then the third one is management. So really my model is to help clients buy, build, and manage, and then rinse and repeat the process. And I don't do it all by myself. With the management side of things, my team manages over 1,000 doors in all of Orange County, from Seal Beach all the way to Dana Point. That's kind of like our cutoff there. So a lot of my deals come from those properties that we manage. We're constantly trying to be of value to our landlords and figure out, if it doesn't make sense to sell it right now or do a 1031 exchange, let's analyze the deal and see how we can add more units, add more doors, increase the NOI, and rinse and repeat the process. And once they see that it works, they're ready to hand off, that money or that capital or that potential investment and move on to the next and kind of rinse and repeat the process. And in some cases, if it makes sense, partner up on these deals, which it's another finding right partnerships and learning how to vet those people. What are their long-term goals, and do their goals align with what you want to do? And, I'd say that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So it actually sounds like you kind of have the project or the property management side that's kind of this, I don't want to say deal flow because it is a great service you're providing, but a very
But
clear
it is,
path
yeah,
to,
the deal flow.
yeah. So I guess, somebody owns a property and they have a good amount of equity in it. When do they know when it's time to sell or if it's time to add ADUs to it?
I'd say, like, with a lot of the conversations that I'm having with some of these landlords, a lot of them, in Orange County, they have their houses and their investment properties paid for. And so what the issue that I see is when it comes to wanting to sell the property, if they're not going to do a 1031 exchange, they get hit with capital gains, right? And capital gains could really be the deal breaker between them either wanting to sell it or maybe just want to keep renting it and maybe increase the rent a little bit. But then, the issue is you can only increase it about, 5% in Orange County. So then that's when we kind of look at that strategy. If it doesn't make sense to sell because you're going to get hit with capital gains and you can't really do a 1031 because you can't find anything else that's of equal or greater value in that specific area, then let's look at, a feasibility option and see what's feasible. And then we kind of just go from there. And that sparks up the conversation. And if that doesn't work, then we just get creative, right? With, okay, well, how much equity does a property have? Can we consider a HELOC loan or maybe leveraging that asset to buy another one that does have potential or use that to finance the build out? And so that's kind of my job, right? Is to be not just a consultant, but strategizing, looking at every single aspect of their assets and seeing how we can kind of maximize a strategy that works for them. But it just really is case by case, right? Because it depends on whether these landlords are tired landlords that don't want to add more doors and they just kind of want to sell it off, or they do want to grow their portfolio.
Yeah, no, it definitely, I mean, that's the way to do it. It's a good answer of it. It depends, right? It depends on if they, what their goal is, how much equity they have in it, what their, what their tax implications are. So, when, I guess for some of these people that you're working with, what are some of the objections that somebody has before deciding if they want to build ADUs on an existing property or not?
I'd say like the top three is number one, capital, right? How are they going to fund it if they're doing multiple ones? Number two is tenants, right? The communication with tenants, especially if there's already tenants living there, which for the most part there are because we're managing them. So looking at that. And then I would say like just their goals, right? Like their motivation is really kind of what it comes down to. And many times I find that clients don't really know. And so they're really looking at us to kind of showcase, well, what's working. So I go through a lot of the case studies on current projects that we have or that we've built, and I kind of show them, like, for example, one that we did in Fullerton was, I think it was a 6-unit, and we did 2 garage conversions in the back. So I'll just show them like what's possible, and once they see it, then it kind of gets their mind going and they're able to see proof of concept and then kind of get creative from there and see what it is that they want to do. But many times they're just kind of saying like, okay, it sounds nice, but how does this work? And so it's a lot of educating them to help them ultimately make the right decision, because we're not here to really sell the product. We know that the product works because, there's an affordability crisis in nationwide, but even more so in California. And, when people say, like you were asking me earlier, right? Should a homeowner build apartments in their backyard? It depends, but we should all be building a lot of units because we're in such a shortage of housing that we're not really in the business. Like my friend Andrew, who's also been a great mentor to me, Andrew Slocum, he's a developer who's written some of these bills as well. So he always says, we're building for people, not for cars. Because a lot of the pushback that we get is, what's parking going to look like? What is what are these neighborhoods going to look like if it's not, if it's not favoring that neighborhood? And I think, yes, we should be mindful about how we build, how much we build in certain pockets, but ultimately we need more housing. So then, that's kind of like the business that we're in, is to build more because we need that. And not just for affordability, but just housing wise, like we're in a shortage of it. So it's needed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's huge because that, to me, I mean, when people think about affordable housing, everyone focuses on the actual quote unquote affordable units themselves. But the whole point, at least in my eyes, and I want your opinion on it, is like the point isn't to provide housing units that are affordable. The point is to provide incentives and fulfill partially, a level of units that are affordable, but provide enough incentives to the developers to be able to
Right.
functionally make it work for them to then, maybe you get 1 out of every 50 units that's affordable. But if you're adding 50, 100, 250 units at a time to a neighborhood because you've now incentivized the developers correctly, it's going to slow down. And sometimes in certain cases, it will bring down pricing. But the main thing is to slow the increase of affordability. Do you agree with that, or what's your thoughts?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think it would slow it down and then just also create more opportunity in the marketplace, right? Like if at some point, in the very near future, once you're able to sell off these ADU condos, right? Because at that point it would be condo communities. It creates a lot more inventory for millennials, for people who just want to live in the city and don't want to have to drive, 2 hours inland anymore. And they have the option to be able to live in downtown San Diego or downtown LA or San Francisco. So, yeah, I mean, I think it just creates a lot of options when you're able to do that. And you should be incentivizing, I think cities and the state should be incentivizing developers to do it because they are the ones kind of taking on that risk, right? Next to lenders, of course. But yeah, you're the ones taking all the risk, and it's almost like the opposite. Like they don't really incentivize you to build. If anything, they make it harder. But I will say that we've come a long way, right? I know that California is probably not the easiest state to work with when it comes to development, but they are getting a lot better at it. And there is no other state that really has these ADU laws, especially in the multifamily space. You look at other states like Oregon, Washington, now Florida. I'm also licensed in Florida and I'm, dabbling and advocating for ADUs in Florida. There's nothing that allows for ADUs in multifamily like there is in California. So the opportunities are still there. And I think maybe there's not incentives, but there's a lot of ordinances and law that's being modified to really help us get there. Like SB 79, clear example, that one just passed, which means now you can build multiple stories anywhere near transit. So now I'm looking at anything within half a mile or 0.2 miles from, places like downtown Long Beach, downtown LA, and now you'd probably be able to implement SB 79 with ADUs on top of that. And that creates a lot more affordability in those places, and it's needed, right? Nobody's going to complain about building a 9-story within half a mile of transit in downtown Long Beach, because there's no parking. Like, I think at some point, if anything, people, myself, when I'm in Florida, for example, everything's kind of walking distance and I don't really need a car. The same thing when I'm in SoCal. I've kind of really focused myself, right, into really not needing a car and just either biking or walking everywhere that I go. And that, to me, I like that. I like living in proximity to where everything is like walking distance. But that's just me, and maybe that is kind of like the new wave, that we may see. And that's okay because housing is more important than where you're going to park. That's just my take.
Hey guys, if you're a business owner, high income earner, or investor who's been thinking about getting into real estate development but don't have the time to manage the process, this is for you. My company partners with people like you to help unlock the potential of your properties or even source and manage new small scale development projects. We manage hundreds of ADUs and infill development projects across Southern California, and our team knows how to simplify the process so you can benefit from the upside without managing contractors, permits, or design headaches. Whether you want to develop your own property, explore ways to offset taxes, or just learn how the development model works, head to thebuildernation.com/partner. That's thebuildernation.com/partner and see how we can help you build more with the same 24 hours. Now back to the show.
No, it definitely is it's a balance. It's a perfect balance, right? You're trying, you have the need for housing and then you have the existing transit systems, which I know depending on the area, like that can be super different. So yeah, I 100% agree that it just, the parking, there is a level that, there's a balance between which one's more important. And it's super like, the other thing is interesting is it is so hyper specific too. Like I think of an area like North Park, for example, in San Diego, and it's super dense over there to where like I can build one unit or I can build 10 and none of them are going to have parking. Like it doesn't really matter, right?
Right.
Downtown areas like Little Italy and near downtown San Diego, areas like that where they are super dense and they already, aren't expected to have parking. There's a different level of need to it where if you're going out to a little bit further out of the downtown areas and stuff, like there might be inherently more value to parking because that's what the neighborhoods know and there's less transit. And so it's a very interesting balance that, as a developer, you're trying to make your best guess on what's going to work for the area.
Exactly. And it really comes down to who's that type of tenant that you're wanting to cater to, and then build, like reverse engineer, right? Put yourself in the tenant's shoes and then think to yourself, okay, if I'm looking for this type of avatar tenant, then reverse engineer and build based on that and, create amenities based on that type of avatar. And, I think that's a good way to really predict, that low vacancy that we're all kind of hoping to get, right? Whether it's long term or midterm. I mean, most of the doors that we manage are long term, but I have 8 that I have as midterms in Hermosa Beach. And, just different areas cater to different types of amenities.
Yeah. No, it makes tons of sense. Moving forward in 2026, what are some of the best strategies for someone with a 1031 exchange to move into the ADU space?
I would say definitely try to do the 1031 if you're able to, right? But before you do the 1031, you need to know where you're going to 1031 to, if there's enough inventory, and look for properties that have ADU potential, right? So, for example, if I have a 4-unit, right, a 4-unit that I want to 1031 to another 4-unit or more, right? Make sure that it's feasible to build on that 4-unit that you're purchasing and that they are available, because the other issue with 1031s is the time frame, right? You need to find something that's of equal or greater value, have it identified within 45 days, and then literally sell and buy within 180 days. And that's the difficult part. That's where I see a lot of our landlords being stuck, is like they do want to do the 1031, but they're limited with options, as to where to 1031. I had a client who wanted a 1031 a property in Orange County to Hawaii. But I was like, hey, before we even have that conversation about selling here, let's see what the inventory looks like in Hawaii. And there was really nothing that was of equal or greater value that he could, even submit an offer on. So I'm like, okay, there's no point in us listing here when you haven't even identified, the new property. But the issue with that is that we have low inventory. So it's just like, you really need to have the timing right and know that there's enough inventory on where you're going to do that 1031 exchange to. And to add to that would be making sure that it has ADU potential, or, SB 1211 if you're talking multiple units.
Yeah, that's so valuable. I had a buddy who had a 1031 that we helped him place on a couple of deals. And it's just crazy when you have that time frame. If you're looking at getting into the ADU thing, I see so many people make the mistake of they buy something and then they say, okay, what can I put on here? Rather than like working with someone like you or someone like me, that we have the knowledge base, we have the experience where it's like, in your market, like I know for a fact that you can look at a deal and in 30 seconds tell them like if this is something that could make sense or not. And,
Right.
and I think that that's so undervalued for some of these people who are on these time frames, especially if, it's a really good, really valuable information to like, go check the inventory first and see if this is even remotely feasible. But inherently too, there is this section of, or, this side where it's like, hey, like if it's just time to move, it's like you're looking for the best of the situation. It's like you're not looking for a home run deal. You're looking for the best that is actively available for you in your market today within that 45-day time period. And working with someone like you is a really valuable way to go in and sift through the bullshit is really what it comes down to. Like I remember we looked at probably 100 deals, 150 deals that were on market, and I probably only underwrote like 5 or 10 of them because it's like you can tell,
Mhm.
like, I mean, like, no, not that one. That one's overpriced. Not even worth it. Like, no ADU potential. It's going to be, 10 times more expensive because of lot conditions or whatever. And it's things that, like, a lot of these people, if they got into this, if they have a 1031, they probably don't even know because they've been in the space for such a long period of time. They haven't had to learn this thing yet.
Exactly. And that comes through reps, right? Doing multiple feasibilities, doing multiple projects, knowing what works, what are the red flags, right? I just posted a carousel earlier about what are some of those red flags. Just having like an ADU checklist of, these are the things that I should look out for before purchasing that property or even before submitting the offer. I think the other thing that people don't know about 1031 exchanges is you don't have to 1031 all of your gains to that new investment. So, I had another client that I helped with the 1031 where he used a portion of the gains to buy another property that did have ADU potential and then use the other capital, right, to buy another property. So if it's feasible, you can, or, you can get creative and use a portion of the gains to finance one of your ADUs on one of your current properties and then transfer the rest of the gains to that new 1031. So I have done a couple of 1031s this year, but I would say the biggest hurdle is, finding something that's really worth doing that 1031 within that certain time frame.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. Yeah, so moving forward, I mean, where do you see SB 79 realistically playing in the marketplace? Do you think it's going to pop off, or do you think it's going to kind of be something that just isn't going to work? What do you think?
I think it's going to work. I mean, people have been pushing for SB 79 for a very long time. And now that it passed, I mean, there's a lot of people in the sidelines that are actively like really, going for that specific strategy and trying to implement that bill. But I was having a conversation with Andrew about it and I was like, what do you think, about SB 79? And I think we both agree that you're not going to see it really come to fruition probably in another year, you know. I think so. So it's kind of hard to say what that's going to look like. But I do think that it's going to create a lot of inventory and opportunity, but you really got to just analyze the deal. Like once SB 79 passed, I had somebody who I've been talking to for a while. He owns a couple of properties. He owns a property in downtown LA. He sends me the address and he's like, hey, SB 79 passed. He replied to my newsletter and he's like, can you analyze this deal? He sends me the address. I look it up. And then as soon as I look it up, I see the power line, like right there. I'm like, dude, this thing is a shit show. Like, even if you could do SB 79 in this area, it is within half a transit. It's just not, this deal doesn't make sense. So, half the battle is the bill being passed, right? The other half is the implementation of it and does it make sense for your specific property. So it doesn't mean that if you have a house within half a mile of transit, now all of a sudden you can, do SB 79. We still have to look at the property and see if it's feasible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is, I agree with that 1,000%. What up?
And then the financing for it, right? You may have a single family home and you're like, oh, I could tear this down and do 9 stories. Oh, that sounds great. Okay, well, how are you going to fund that? Right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it's such a conundrum because I tell people that like financing an ADU is on a spectrum. It's the more equity you have, the easier it is to finance it, but the more equity you have either existing or that you're building in. But the conundrum is like the more equity you build into it, the more difficult it is or the more expensive it is to raise because there's the more money you have to raise for it. So it's this balance of like, just because you can build 9 stories doesn't mean that you have the bandwidth or wherewithal to actually raise the money, even if there's a larger margin percentage wise than what you would be doing on a smaller project. And I think that
Exactly.
people don't always think about that.
No. Now, and even some of these investors who are calling me and scheduling appointments to talk about how to scale with SB 1211 and SB 1123 even, you got to consider, utility upgrades. That might kill your deal right there. And so it's all these little small details that it sounds great on paper and it looks great, but really take a look at it, and read between the lines or reach out to somebody that kind of does this, on a daily basis. We're constantly analyzing deals, seeing what works, what doesn't, what we would do. It's kind of like having an ADU lens, that most people just don't have.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree. Okay, so I want to take us into a little bit of like a rapid fire section
Okay.
for you. A little bit of like disagree, agree or disagree, and kind of get your idea or get your thoughts on a couple different statements that I've seen in groups or just kind of seen in certain places. So most ADU designers have no idea how to actually build ADUs. Do you agree or disagree?
I would say I agree with that. Yeah,
Okay.
they really
Why is
don't.
that?
I think because the majority of them maybe just have the certain standard of like their design, I don't know, practice or, like the way they've been taught. And I think for, ADU specifically, there's just a different eye and a different design pattern that works for these smaller units for the most part, right? For the smaller units, I'm talking 400 to 800 square foot units. Yeah, I would say that not everybody has that gift to really be able to design a functional space that size. And maybe that's just the way that they've been trained, but I would say there's very few. Just like there's very few architects, engineers, developers, lenders, realtors, contractors that have that ADU lens perspective. So yeah, I would say there's very few.
Yeah, no, that's good. The functionality, I love that you mentioned that the functionality side of things of yes, they can get it permitted, but is it actually going to underwrite the way you need it to? Is the value going to
Hmm.
be there, and did they design it in the most cost efficient way for it to pencil for you? Because if you can get a
Yeah.
permit, and that's why I mean that's a huge portion of why the thousands and tens of thousands of people haven't actually finished their ADUs because they can't get the thing financed because they didn't realize
Hmm.
that they have the permit, but there's no way that they can get this thing built because it's going to be twice as expensive as their contractor said. Oh yeah, I'll build it at 50,000. Is that it's
Exactly.
actually going to be? So yeah,
Yeah, I
it
mean, a
makes it.
lot of designers, that's why, when I work with Cameron on some of the design and build, I love working with them because we do this all day, every day. And they know what works, not just for financing, but also for the tenant and for that specific neighborhood or property or just everything, the layout, the functionality, the flexibility of it. But in other cases, I see like the same thing you're talking about. They run into issues because sometimes when you choose to work with a designer and you kind of put together your own team, right? You pick your own designer, you pick your own contractor and your own lender and your own exit strategy that you came up with. And the problem is a lot of these people just aren't in sync, right? The designer's not really looking out for the lender and for the exit strategy and taking that into consideration when they're doing their design. And so and vice versa, right? The contractor's just there reading what's on the plans and just going based off that. They're not thinking, well, maybe we should have done it this way for the sake of the tenant or the investor, or everybody kind of just has like their own, perspective on it, and no one's really aligned in many cases. It's very important to make sure everyone on the team is aligned and understands how their job plays a role in your exit strategy. Just like with the VA, right? I was watching a video on Alex Hermosi the other day, and he was saying how you should really let everyone on your team know how their role kind of plays into your profits, including the photographer and videographer, right? And the edits and how all that, the thumbnails, the title, every single little detail, how it plays a role into your bottom line. And I take that into the ADU process as well, right? Like making sure that everyone on the team understands how their decision making and their job affects the bottom line. And then that kind of puts it all together for everyone. But if
Yeah,
they don't
no,
know what they know, it's kind of hard.
exactly. No, that's huge. No, that's a great answer. Okay, next one. Feasibility is more important than construction. Agree or disagree?
Yeah, I agree. Definitely.
Okay.
You got to
Why
know
why
what's
is that?
feasible before you build on it. Yeah.
That's fair. I've talked to many contractors who would disagree with me. I
Really?
agree with you for sure that it's like if you can't get it to the construction, it doesn't fucking matter. But
Yeah,
a lot of them
exactly.
say, well, there's so many things that can go wrong in construction, so that's the side that matters the most. But you're saying feasibility. I agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that happens and, we've been there and we deal with those hiccups once we get there. But the feasibility really gives you, a good understanding of what some of those roadblocks would be down the line. And
Yeah,
not just for the construction, the feasibility gives me an eye on everything, not
right.
just construction.
Yeah, well, and I agree, because the feasibility isn't just, can I build this? It should take into account a rough soft cost, a rough, hard cost for construction,
100%. Yeah, when I
timelines,
do the
holding costs.
feasibility, yeah, when we do the feasibility, that gives me the opportunity to be able to give you a proposal based on the feasibility. And then that proposal or that soft range of cost then kind of ties into the financing and your exit strategy and the rents and everything. It helps with everything, I'd say.
Yeah, no, it's very, very important when you to look at all the different pieces of it. Because yeah, when you talk to a contractor and they say, oh yeah, like, I'll build it for this, I always, I give people shit all the time. I'm like, if a contractor's giving you a bid before you even have a permit, they're full of shit, because they don't actually know what you're gonna build. So how can they give you a price on it?
Exactly.
No,
Yeah.
it's
And
funny.
those are the contractors that, leave your job halfway done because they didn't budget correctly, because they didn't give you the proper proposal. They just kind of threw out a number 6 months ago that now, because of inflation and the cost of everything, right? Cost of goods has gone up, is no longer the case. And many of them, sadly, do leave these jobs halfway done. And then they call you back saying, you know what? I messed up. I should have worked with you. And you're like, yeah, no, thank you. I'm not taking over someone else's job for liability purposes. And also because like nobody wants to take, a half left job. So it's very difficult. That's when it costs you more, right? You went with someone who was going to charge you, let's say, less than 100,000. Now it's going to cost you about the same to get it done once again with someone else.
Yeah, no, I love that. Okay, last one. So the average homeowner can execute an ADU project on their own and they don't need help. Agree or disagree?
No, I disagree big time.
Why is
Unless
that?
Unless you are someone like our friends, Keisha and Noah, which you met, right? They were out in San Diego when they met you in person, and they were very excited when they met you. I remember they text me, and I'm good friends with Keisha and Noah. If you guys don't know who we're talking about, I've had them on the podcast. You should definitely have Keisha on
Yes,
the
yeah,
podcast because her story is very inspiring, and it sounds beautiful and amazing and very inspiring. But I always tell Keisha, you put a lot of hard work and dedication into understanding the legislative process, the planning process, and your husband has construction background. So, you bring those two together and that's a powerful team, but that's not your average homeowner. So, yeah.
exactly.
So no, the average homeowner cannot build this on their own. And you can try it, but I will say that if you try to do it on your own, you are signing up for 7 different jobs that you don't even know of yet. But that will be becoming the designer, the architect, the contractor, the property manager, and just to name a few.
Just a few of them. It makes
Yeah.
tons of sense. So you'd recommend, average homeowner, they should probably reach out to somebody who has a little bit more experience to kind of walk them through and guide them through the process.
Yeah, if you're an average homeowner, you don't know anything about ADUs, I would say start off by reading the HCD handbook. That's going to give you a lot of knowledge about the ADU law, understand what's allowed by state law. And that's going to empower you to be able to have conversations with designers, with builders, and kind of make the decision on who you want to work with. Because many times they just kind of go with the contractor, right? Not knowing anything about ADUs, and they just go with whoever they think is going to help them build it. But then the issue there is you're not really savvy enough to know how to vet these people. And so I would say first empower yourself with knowledge and then take action or vet the right person or reach out to an expert that's kind of done it.
Such valuable information. Yeah, I appreciate it. So people want to get in touch with you. They want to follow along the journey. They have ADU questions. What's the best way to get in contact?
You can DM me at Steph Sells ADU. That's my Instagram. I am very active on there, just showcasing and sharing the journey and the process. And then also my website, adugginvestments.org. I have all 3 services laid out there. So whether it's ADU strategizing, consulting, or selling 1031 exchanges, or property management, whether it's midterm or long term, you guys can book a call there. And and then we'll see if we're able to work together.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on. There's been so much good ADU knowledge on this podcast. I'm excited for people to hear it.
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me. I'll see you.
That's it for this episode of the Build a Nation podcast. If it gave you something to think about, hit subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who's leveling up. Until next time, keep building.